Well, good afternoon, Logger community. Thank you so much for joining us on day 2 of Puget Sound's first ever Future Heights Career Conference. I'm Ted Merriam, class of 2005, and I'm the president of Puget Sound's Alumni Council. Currently, I also work at Microsoft in the San Francisco Bay Area, supporting customers like PayPal and Google. And while it was 15 years ago since I joined Microsoft upon graduation from UPS, it was an alumni connection that helped me land my first job. And for that, I am incredibly grateful for the power of the alumni network at Puget Sound, and also for the relationships that fueled my ability to join a first-class company like Microsoft as I graduated. So thank you for joining us on day 2 of Puget Sound's first ever Future Heights Career Conference. Your investment in learning and networking opportunities like this are key to your success as you navigate this exceptional job market we face in 2021. First off, specifically, I'd like to welcome our students. I hope you are able to attend yesterday's sessions and that you will take advantage of the remaining sessions that you have coming before us. If you haven't already, make sure you also register for the closing event, the alumni and student reception, which is set for this Friday evening at 5 p.m. We have Logger alumni on hand who are eager to meet with you, share advice, swap stories about life and beyond at Puget Sound. So you certainly won't want to miss that. Welcome also to any parents, alumni, or friends of the university. You are important members of the Logger Network, guiding and supporting our students on their path to future heights. This afternoon's keynote features Christine Cruzvergara, who is the Vice President of Higher Education and Student Success at Handshake. You may be familiar with Handshake as the tool used by Puget Sound's Career and Employment Services team to provide Logger students with job and internship postings, online appointment scheduling, and information about career events. Christine's wealth of experience and vast knowledge base has positioned her as a thought leader and expert in the field of career preparation for college students. She has an undergraduate degree in psychology from James Madison University. Her own career path has led from a Master of Arts in the College of Student Personnel at University of Maryland through professional roles and career services at Georgetown University, George Mason University, and most recently at Wellesley College, where she served as Associate Provost and Executive Director of Career Education. Christine has been with Handshake since January of 2019, where she had her finger on the pulse of hiring trends among employers who recruit talent from colleges across the country. What's her motto? Where you come from doesn't have to define where you go. This belief has been the hallmark of her career journey and a driving force behind the change that she seeks to make in young people in this country. So with that, I invite you to join me in a warm welcome for our keynote speaker today, Christine.
Thank you so much, Ted. I appreciate it. Welcome. Good afternoon to everyone here. I hope you're all doing well. I always like for presentations to be as interactive as possible, and certainly while we are all here virtually, that is sometimes a little bit harder to do. So what I will ask is if you are participating right now, whether you're a student, an alum, a parent, whoever you are, and however you are connected to University of Puget Sound, your role is critical. Your role is critical in helping students to define and determine sort of who they are and what they're interested in. And your role is critical in helping them to connect to these opportunities that we'll talk about today. So if you don't mind introducing yourself, not only to me, but also to each other in the chat box, that would be wonderful. Would love to see some interaction there. I am not at all distracted throughout the presentation by any of the comments or things that might resonate with you. If you want to plus something I'm saying, if there's something I'm saying that is intriguing to you or interesting, feel free to note it. If you have a question, by all means, please don't hesitate to go ahead and start sending those in. I know that we have a full team on the back end that will be collecting those, and Ted and I will have plenty of time for Q&A towards the end of our presentation today. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. I thought what I would do is first kick us off by talking a little bit about the future trends that we're seeing in the field around recruitment right now. Obviously, as you all know, 2020 heavily changed what was happening. COVID-19 caused us to all go virtual. It caused us to all rethink how we were doing work and how we were doing learning. And there's certain trends that are coming out of that experience that I believe are really here to stay. For those of you that are a little bit unfamiliar with Handshake, let me just provide a little bit of context. So we are the #1 place for college students to find jobs and internships, and we have the largest network nationally, where we partner with over 1,100 universities and colleges to help connect them and their students, about 17 million of them students, to over 500,000 employers. So these trends are truly across a number of different industries, a number of different sectors, a number of different sizes, and all different types of students as well. So with that, let's jump right in. All right, first trend, virtual is here to stay. I don't know that this is necessarily a surprise to anybody, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what that means. Virtual is here not only for your recruiting experience and what you will experience as a student as you go through this process of looking for your internship or your job, but it is also likely to be here to stay for your actual work experience. The reason I note this and the reason I want you to think about this as a student is because your ability to get comfortable with virtual is going to be highly important to not only how you navigate your experience in searching for an opportunity, but your experience in excelling in that opportunity once you get the job or the internship. So for your recruiting experience, if you do not currently have some type of online presence, you need to. That is one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later in today's presentation. You need to have some type of online presence. You need to make sure that you are engaging with employers and that you're engaging with alumni online. When you receive a message, think about what's the etiquette for how you might be able to respond, even if you're not interested in something. Because the reality is you want to be able to build relationships and continue to build connections. You don't want to burn bridges. And so thinking about your online and your virtual presence is going to be really key. Thinking about how comfortable you are with different platforms like Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Hangout, right? All of these are becoming more of the norm in everyday sort of recruiting experience as well as work experience. And your ability to feel comfortable with that and to know how to navigate it is going to be really important for you to be able to showcase your best self. Now, when it comes to the work experience, what this means is that you are also going to have more opportunity. And this part is really exciting. You no longer are necessarily going to have to move to a particular city in order to have the type of job that you want. With virtual, we are seeing more and more employers grow in flexibility around virtual and remote work, which means you may be able to live where you want and also work where you want. Now, is it going to be exactly like it has been for the past 9 to 12 months? No, probably not. But what we are going to see is a huge shift from many major employers to even SMBs, which stands for small medium businesses, where they will be far more flexible and open to these types of remote positions. And so it's definitely something for you to keep in mind, both while you're searching, as well as while you're negotiating or you're thinking about your advancement at a particular company. The second theme that we are really seeing is that mental health matters. I know for a lot of the students, for a lot of the alumni, for a lot of the parents on the call today, 2020 was extremely difficult and it tested you personally and emotionally and intellectually in ways that you probably never could have imagined. Well, I want to make sure that I highlight this because for a lot of people I've spoken with, they felt alone and they felt like maybe they were some of the only ones that were really struggling to the level that they were. But the reality is you're not alone. You have a full community. You're very lucky that at the University of Puget Sound, you have a strong, even stronger community of alumni and of advisors and of administrators that genuinely care. And what we are seeing in our survey data is that over 65% of students, your peers, have said that they are prioritizing mental health and that they want to find employers that also care about mental health. So for any of you alums or employers on the line, if you are in a position to be able to influence that at your company or your organization, I encourage you to do so. Over 60% of students are saying that when they look at job opportunities, they are looking for employers that have some type of mental health benefit rolled into the compensation. That doesn't just mean employee assistance programs where you have access to a mental health counselor. That also includes well-being programs or well-being benefits. It includes exercise and things that might relate to that. And it also includes information and genuine, strong processes around equity and access and how that is also impacting people's mental health. So think about mental health from sort of a broad standpoint and make sure that if you happen to be an alum or an employer on the call, you're thinking about that. And as a student, know that you are not alone and it is okay to think about how you want to care for yourself and your community. Now, I want to tie the first two things together. Mental health also matters even more when you think about more virtual and more remote, because the boundaries of sort of your personal life and your work life are going to be more blended. And so you're going to have to think about, what does that mean for you? And what are the boundaries that allow you to stay sort of have a stable equilibrium? You also want to think about, how do you build community when you are more virtual, when you might not see your team or the people at your company as frequently as you would have in person? How do you still build those bonds? How do you still build those connections? What will be the mechanisms for that? And how can the company that you want to intern or work at, how can they help to facilitate that? Those are questions that you can certainly ask as you're exploring the different opportunities you look at. And finally, the third trend that we're seeing is that hiring is happening. I know that every day when you open the news, what you're seeing is doom and gloom around unemployment. It is at an all-time high. There are a lot of people that are still struggling. There are a lot of folks that have lost their jobs. Those are all realities. But what I'm also here to tell you is that there are opportunities and there is hiring that is currently happening. There's hiring that's happening on Handshake, and there's hiring that's happening obviously in many other places as well. So what's important as a student is to be flexible and creative in thinking about how you apply your skills, right? As a liberal arts graduate, some of the things that you are walking away with is critical thinking, your ability to synthesize large amounts of information, to be able to make sense of it, to be able to articulate it and communicate it in a way that multiple audiences can understand. These are really useful skills, regardless of what industry or what role you want to go into. So perhaps you came into school thinking you really wanted to pursue something in a particular area, and maybe that area isn't hiring as much at the moment. That's okay. Instead, think about how you can apply that in a new or different way. Now, hiring is still down about 40% or so, but we are seeing it stabilize. It is no longer dipping down. We are seeing it stabilize and starting to creep back up. There are obvious industries that are struggling a bit more. You look at aviation, you look at hospitality, you look at food and beverage, right? Those are still areas that are struggling the most, but there are other industries that are hiring. Tech is hiring, education is hiring, healthcare is hiring, financial services is hiring, and the government is hiring. Those are some of the industries where we are personally seeing still huge growth and activity happening. So just keep that in mind and make sure that you're not taking a pessimistic view at sort of what is occurring. Now, I personally have worked in career services for many years, and I worked during the last recession as well. And one of the very unique behaviors that sort of happens with many students during recessions, you would think, is that they would apply more to more opportunities. But the opposite actually usually happens. You actually tend to see less applications for many of the jobs, not more applications. And the reason around this is typically because people think there aren't a lot of opportunities, the competition is really fierce, and why would somebody want me? So you know what, maybe I'll just wait it out. Maybe I'll try something else instead, or kind of span out my education a little bit longer, but I'm not going to apply right now, even though the job is kind of interesting because I think somebody else is going to get it. Well, you know what? That's the exact same thinking somebody else is having at the same time. And so what I encourage you to do is, if it is interesting to you, apply. If it is interesting, apply. Do it. Because the reality is there might not be as many people as you think there are that are currently applying. Certainly not as much quality as I know our employers are hoping for. So definitely make sure to still take that action. Okay. So now let's actually transition into the second part of the process and the presentation today, which is to actually talk about what 4 steps do you need to take in order to do a proper search this day and age. Okay. All right, let's jump right in. Now, I want to share that as you think through these 4 steps, you are likely to have received advice from many people in your life, whether it's your parents or your older siblings or your aunts and uncles, or perhaps neighbors, or it could be somebody in the career center, right? And sometimes you feel overwhelmed because you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's just so many things to remember. It's like a huge long checklist and I just don't know how I'm going to be able to make sense of all of it. I was a psychology major, so I believe in chunking information so that it makes it a little bit easier for you to sort of remember. So these are the 4 steps. First are your documents, and we're going to talk about what that means. Second is your research. Third is network. And fourth is search. Okay. What I want to reiterate to you is that typically when most people go through a search, they like to skip the middle steps. They do their documents, they have their resume, their cover letter, their online profile, and then they skip right to search. They go from 1 to 4. And you know what I typically hear from people? I'm not hearing back. It's a big black hole. Nobody's getting back to me. I don't know why this isn't working. I've applied to so many things, right? And they wonder why. The reason why is because they've typically left out the middle 2 steps. They haven't done enough research and they haven't done enough networking. So we're going to talk today about how to thoroughly make sure that you've done each of these different steps, because if you do, step 4 of actually searching is going to become significantly easier than it was before. And if at any point something's not working for you there, it's important for you to reflect and think back, which one of these steps might I have needed to do more? Is there something wrong with my documents? Do I have a big red flag that I need to look at? Maybe I need a career advisor from CES to take a look at that. Or perhaps I'm not doing enough research and I still am not showing my sort of capacity to really understand this industry. Or perhaps I'm doing a really poor job at networking and I need someone to help me there, right? But it allows you to get a gauge of potentially where you're going to be. So let's jump right in and let's talk about documents first and what you need to do and what we mean here by this. Okay. Let's see. When I say documents, what I mean are essentially 3 things. You have your resume, your cover letter, and your online profile, okay? All 3 of these materials need to complement each other. They should not regurgitate each other. They should not replicate each other. They should complement each other. Your resume will show your breadth of experience, okay? Your cover letter will show your depth of experience. And your online profile is going to be a bit of a living, essentially a living, breathing document that is a blend of both and will be able to bring to life a little bit more of the narrative of who you are and your experience. You can rest assured that people are going to be looking you up when you apply for things, when you have an interview, okay? So your online presence and your online profile, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be really critical here. Now, with your resume, you're obviously going to note the different experiences you've had, whether that's part-time jobs, student organizations, coursework that you've completed, perhaps internships that you've had before, so on and so forth. Now, your cover letter instead is not going to be a summary in narrative form of your resume. Instead, what I want you to do when you think about this, for jobs that even require a cover letter, read that job description and really put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter or the hiring manager and think, what are the 2 to 3 skills that are most important to this particular job, to this particular role? And what experiences, 1 or 2 examples, concrete examples you've had that actually highlight that you have those skills? It is much stronger to show that you have the skill of persuasion than to say you have the skill of persuasion, for example. Okay, so think about those pieces. And again, in your online profile, make sure that you are clear about who you are and what you bring to the table. And make sure that those narratives are all consistent across. You definitely don't want, and I have seen both students and alumni sometimes do this, you don't want your resume to seem like you're really interested in this particular technical role, but then you look at the cover letter and you can't quite figure out why, and then you look at the online profile and it seems like your background is totally focused or geared towards something else. You want to make sure that there's some level of consistency around that, and it's a very clear narrative of who you are and what you bring to the table. If you have questions about this or you're not sure on some of these questions, make sure to go in and actually see CES. Talk to a career advisor, talk to somebody that can actually work with you to clarify those pieces, because this is foundational. Right now, you are essentially marketing your product, and your product is you. And so you need to make sure it is very clear and the value proposition of you is super clarified. Okay. Students who complete their Handshake profile, just to give you an example, a concrete example, are 80% more likely to receive an employer message. Okay. Students who complete their Handshake profile are 80% more likely to receive an employer message. All right, so let's jump into research here. When I'm talking about research, I am talking about doing both what I call micro research and macro research. All right, micro research means the company, the position, the team, right? Typically, I see most students try and do this. Okay, most students will think about what role might I want to have at what company, and they'll do some level of at least preliminary research about that. That's good. Continue doing that and dig a little bit deeper. If you're interested in a marketing position within a company, look to see what team or function does marketing fall under. Does it sit as its own vertical or division? Does it sit under a business line? If so, what business line? How does that business line interact with the other business lines at the company, right? What's the overlap? What are the dynamics? You want to kind of learn some of those pieces. Think about and look them up in the news. Have they recently made decisions? Have they taken a stance on something? Have they just rolled out something new? Make sure you know what's going on there. Now, with macro research, this is where I typically see most candidates fail to do enough. You can't just know about your role and the company you want to go to. You need to also take the time to do industry research. You should be able to speak fairly eloquently about what are some of the emerging trends in this particular industry. Okay. You want to think about what those are. You want to know them. You want to read about them. You want to follow thought leaders in your area. You want to learn the industry language, right? I used to work in higher education. I now work in ed tech. In higher education, we talk about students and parents, alumni. In ed tech, we might talk about our clients or our customers or our partners, right? Something as simple as that, being able to flex your language and know when to use some terms versus other terms, right? Is it tuition? Is it revenue? And making sure that you can essentially talk shop. That is something that is important to a lot of employers as they are interviewing you. It's in the back of their mind, but it allows them to know how much does this person really understand about our business, about our organization, about the market that we sit in, and about the work that we are ultimately trying to advance and do. You also want to do more macro research on hiring timelines and practices. Now, different industries obviously have very different hiring timelines. Finance, consulting, some of tech does heavy recruiting in the fall, while some of the other areas, let's say, for example, you were interested in PR or advertising or marketing, do more of what we would call just-in-time hiring. That happens more in the spring, right? And so knowing the different timelines can also, one, help you not stress too much. If you happen to have a roommate or a colleague or a friend that already has something secured in the fall, but maybe your interests are drastically different and your process doesn't happen till the spring. Right? You also want to know about different practices. So for example, in consulting, a case style interview is a very common part of the recruitment process. That isn't as common in other industries, right? And the way in which you would prepare and engage in that looks very different. So making sure that you do your micro and macro research is going to be really key. Now, one of the things that you can also do that's actually right on Handshake is even read peer reviews about some of the companies that you're interested in. So this is just an example of a peer review that was left in Handshake about Microsoft, actually, and what this intern's experience was like, what they enjoyed, what they wish that was different, and any advice that they have. Now, what you can do is you can take this, you can take a look at the person leaving the review, you can read all different reviews, and you could even reach out to that student to have a peer-to-peer conversation and to get even more nuance and to learn more. But this is all part of the research that you want to do as you continue to go through your search process. All right, just want to check time and make sure we're doing good. All right, the next step is network. Okay, so as I was just mentioning about peer-to-peer messaging, this actually flows really nicely into this next section on networking. Real networking is about building real relationships. And I'm going to repeat this a few times. Too often, people think of networking as, oh, how many connections do you have? Oh, did you meet that person and get their business card? Oh, yeah, I just sort of like said hello to this person at this particular event. Okay. Real networking is not about schmoozing. It's not just about the immediate connection. It is about building a real relationship. And this, I hope, can actually serve as some solace for some students who I know hate and cringe at the word networking because it might feel awkward, it might feel hard, and it might feel very, very scary. The reality is, if you approach networking less about quantity and more about quality, you will actually see greater returns. So let me just sort of talk you through what this can look like. For every 10 people that most of my students have reached out to, for every 10 people most of my students have reached out to, maybe 5 will get back to them. Okay. So I just want you to kind of right size that in your head. Every single person you reach out to is not necessarily going to accept or write you back. And that is okay. Sometimes people are busy. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt there. Of the 5 people that write you back and that you end up meeting with, you are maybe going to feel like you really connected with maybe 2, maybe 1 or 2 of them. Okay. And that is also okay. You're going to learn a little something from probably all 5, but you might not feel like there was a connection or that you necessarily want to actively keep that relationship going with all 5 of them. And that is okay too. Let it be natural and really think about a real relationship. On this next slide, you can see some of my advice on what you can do to make this feel a little bit more normal. Really, it's about taking an interest in somebody else. Be curious about the people that you are reaching out to. You're obviously reaching out for a purpose. And often it should be about learning more about them. How did they get to where they are? What was their career path like? What were the obstacles that they might have had to get over? And what did they learn from that looking back in hindsight? What advice might they have for you? You can also use these conversations to do more of your research. You should be asking the people you're talking to, what are the emerging trends that you are facing? How do you think about where your business is going or where the marketplace that you might be in is headed, right? What are the hiring timelines? What are some of the practices? You can learn a lot of those macro trends from these conversations as well, and it gives you something more substantive to talk about and to be able to connect on. As you learn from the research and the different conversations you're having, I hope that you will also use that to better inform the types of questions that you are then asking the next person and the next person and the next person. Because the way in which you ask questions can truly also reflect your critical thinking, how well you're able to synthesize and put information together, and how quickly you can apply that in your own work. So definitely think about all of those different components. And like I mentioned, one of the things that you can do on Handshake is peer messaging. So this is one of the things that you can actually see in the platform. You can click on the different students. Some of them might go to University of Puget Sound. You can certainly do a search based on that. And you actually also have access to students and alumni that are at some of the other Handshake schools too, that might also have interests that you would want to connect with. All right, now let's get to the last section, 4-step search process. Now you are actually at the search. If you've already clarified who you are, what you bring to the table, you're likely to be able to do a more targeted search for what it is that is interesting to you. You've then done your research, so you know your area better. You know what hiring managers are probably looking for. You know what value add the marketplace is looking for and how you might be able to position yourself. You've networked and you've already met a lot of people. So now the search process is significantly easier for you, right? It's not easy, but it should be easier than it was before you did all of these different things because you've gained so much knowledge along the way. Now, keep in mind, I actually did a quick search just the other night to take a look. There are already currently over 3,000 opportunities available right now. Okay, so when you go on to Handshake right now, you're already going to see over 3,000 opportunities. Now, I didn't filter for full-time versus internship. You can do that to take a look for what it is you're looking for. But there's no reason why you can't be in there and starting to take a look at what's available and what might be interesting to you and start preparing for what that can look like. All right, as a reminder, what most people do is step 1 to step 4. 1 to 4. I'm going to do my documents, and then I'm going to apply, and search. Okay. Don't make the same mistake. Make sure you actually spend the time to do your research and to do your networking. It will pay off for you. So here's an overview of all 4 steps. Your documents, your resume, your cover letter, your online profile, having a clear narrative of who you are, your research at both the macro and micro level, making sure you network with alumni, with Handshake peers, right? And then actually doing your search for the types of opportunities that you are looking for. Now, I know some of you are also thinking, and this is my last slide for you, well, this is all great, Christine, but we're virtual, and it might be a little bit difficult to do some of these things. So let me rest assured, there are plenty of ways for you to engage virtually right now, okay? First and foremost, you can make an appointment with your career advisor. Clarify your goals, clarify your interests, clarify the process you need to take, and make sure you have a very clear narrative about who you are and what you will bring to the table. Then you can start finding other peers at Puget Sound and other Handshake schools and start chatting with them, learn from their experiences, right? You're not the first to go through this. So make sure you find your community of folks that you can really tap into. Follow employers. This will help you get notifications about new opportunities that they're posting, new events that they're hosting or that they're participating in. Attend the virtual events, okay? Your institution, along with the employers, are going to be hosting virtual fairs and coffee chats and other meetings. So make sure you sign up for it and then make sure you actually go to it. These are opportunities to be able to meet employers directly and to be able to actually have conversations with them. Don't pass up this opportunity. Make sure to actually reply to the messages. Like I said, for those of you out there that actually complete your profile, you're 80% more likely to receive a message. You might actually start receiving lots of messages, right? Think about how you want to respond, even to the ones that you're not interested in. Talk to ambassadors. We are increasing the number of ambassadors, alumni ambassadors that are going to be able to be in the system in Handshake. So make sure that you are seeking and talking to employer ambassadors and alumni ambassadors in Handshake, and you'll hear more about this over the course of the year to learn more about their companies and things that you should keep in mind as you apply for those opportunities. And then finally, you can apply. This is pretty straightforward, but like I said at the beginning, you can't get the job if you don't actually apply. So these are all the ways virtually for you to still engage right now and to be able to take an action step forward. So with that, we will turn it over to the Q&A section, and I welcome Ted back to the screen. I believe he's going to help us moderate today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Christine, for that very insightful presentation. And as I think about and reflect on your 4-step process that you shared, if you think about the networking component alone, we have over 35,000 loggers in our alumni network, for example. That would be a perfect network for our students to tap into, and that welcome all of our folks on the call, as well as all of our current students, to engage and have conversations for career purposes. So I appreciate the process. I think you're absolutely spot on as I reflect on my own career, as far as, looking at research and network as a key component to landing a position. But for you, Christine, we have one of our first questions. You mentioned the various different industries that are still hiring now, which is great. But the question is, even though hiring is still happening, how much of that is for entry-level positions?
Yep, very easy to answer that question. All of the positions, the sheer majority, over 95% of the positions in Handshake are all entry-level positions. That is one of the benefits of using Handshake as a student or a young alumni right now, is that the majority of those positions are for entry level. They are for 0 to 3 years of experience typically. We are starting to see more employers that are posting mid-level positions in Handshake and that are interested in getting some alums that might be coming back after their second or third job as well. We anticipate that that will continue to grow over the next 3 to 5 years. But currently speaking, when you're in the system, a lot of the positions that you're going to see are in fact entry level or internships.
That's great. That's really reassuring. Our students are also asking, what if you're interested in a job that isn't considered an entry level position? Is it still possible to get it?
I love the ambition. I think that's great. Honestly, I would say it depends on the company. It depends on the industry and it depends on your skill level and what it is you're looking to do. Now, I realize everything I just said there was it depends, but that's the reality. So if you're looking at an organization, let's just say, for example, you're looking at a much larger organization and they're looking for a position to fill a position that is not entry level. The reality is you probably are going to have a harder time being able to get your foot in the door because they either are going to have internal candidates at their organization that might already have some of the experience that you don't have that might be able to slot in. So if they're going to take a risk, they might take a risk with a known entity, a known quantity, right? Or they're going to have other outside competitive candidates where they will be able to have some of the skill set that you don't have. Now, if you are looking at a smaller organization, say a startup or a small or medium-sized organization, there might be more flexibility to have a conversation about what exactly are they looking for and what might you be able to bring to the table that's perhaps a unique asset or a unique advantage right now. And instead, maybe they can help train you on some of the pieces that are not the entry level component of that, right? And so a lot of this comes down to who you are, what you know your skill set to be and what you can bring to the table and what it is that employer is looking for. So I realize this is it's a fairly vague answer to your question, but we would need to sit down and actually take a look at what's the position you're interested in or you're thinking about and what is your skill level and sort of what is that gap? Is it a huge gap or is it a gap that's maybe just like a year or two and actually you probably fill it? And what's the advantage that you might be able to bring to the table right off the bat that would make it worthwhile for them to take that risk?
Great. The next question up is, how can we meaningfully network with professionals as part of the micro research in a way that feels genuine and not like we're just trying to get in easy?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Ted, I welcome your insights too. You've been a hiring manager. I know you've hired many people onto your teams over the years too. And so would
Sure.
love to also hear some of your insight. I think with this one, it's make sure that your interests are genuine when you reach out. That's one of the first ways to ensure that it's a genuine outreach. Um, People know that you are obviously looking for information so that you can become a stronger candidate so that you might be able to apply for an opportunity, right? You don't have to hide that. And that's certainly not something that most professionals are going to be surprised about. However, what you do want to ask are genuine questions about what it is you want to know from that particular professional. So your question is not, can you get me a job? Could you put in a good word with a hiring manager? I would not go that route. That is never a helpful route. Instead, I would ask genuine questions about, I am very interested in working. Let's say, for example, I'll give you this example. I get a lot of requests from people that are interested in working at Handshake. I'm interested in working at Handshake, but I realize I don't know if I'm a good fit for any of the positions right now. Could we have a conversation? I would love to learn more about the business. I'd love to learn more about your vertical and the business line, Christine, that you oversee. And I would love to have a better understanding of the different types of roles and what are the qualifications or the competencies that you all are looking at. I understand you're also a fast growth startup and you happen to be at this point in time in where you're scaling. So could you tell me what that looks like and what are the profiles of those particular positions, right? That's something that I feel very happy to be able to share and to have a conversation with without feeling like somebody is putting me on the spot and they're going to be pressuring me to move them forward into HR or something like that, right? And so that's what I would say is make sure you have genuine questions that you actually want to know about that particular organization or about some of those roles. Ted, I imagine you get lots of questions like this as well. Would you agree with that, or do you have any
I,
different advice?
yeah, I would completely agree with it. Both as a mentor and also as a former hiring manager of college students, incidentally, at Microsoft. What I have found is when I have students or even individuals who are early on in their career come for me for help, it's important for them to be, specific enough to ask how I can help them versus, vague and not really introspective in their process. And I think that's why, to your notion, research comes before network to a degree, so that you have at least enough context around the company or, my position or how I can help versus wanting me to do that work for you up
Yeah.
front. So it's a lot easier for me to help you go on a path or recommend a position for you at a company or whatever it may be if I have a little bit more context. But research is required to do that up front.
I love that. I think your point too about like make it easy, right? Make it easy for someone to say yes, or make it easy for someone to help is a really key point here.
Totally. All right, we have a question actually from a former logger and a former staff member at Puget Sound. When networking, what questions should I ask alums when in an informational interview?
Okay. I think there are a number of different questions that you can ask alums. I think first and foremost, I am always curious sort of what brought you to where you are right now? Like, help me understand sort of how did your experience at Puget Sound sort of lead you to where you are at the moment? And I always think that's a fascinating question because especially depending on how long somebody has been out and how long they have graduated, when you look in hindsight, there are a whole bunch of things that suddenly make sense that sometimes when you're looking forward, don't make as much sense, or you don't always see those connections immediately. But in hindsight, it's super easy for me to see that I have a real passion about people and my team and about change management. Those are threads that have actually been through my entire career in every single position I've taken. But at the time, if you had asked me that, I wouldn't have known, right? And so thinking about asking people that opening question is likely to actually surface a lot about that person, how they think about their career, and how they've approached it, which then opens up other questions that you can ask them. You're going to find that some people have been extremely planful. They've known for a long time this is exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to be able to move up to this type of position, and they've sort of strategically put into place position by position what that's going to look like. And you might ask them, what were your strategies for doing that? How did you get that level of clarity? Now you're going to find other people, I'll say actually like myself, I've never planned my career explicitly to sort of define exactly where I wanted to be. Instead, I actually believe in just being open to opportunity and doing a really good job at the particular job I'm at right now. And when you do that, new opportunities will sort of open up. And so my lesson to myself has been, how do you actually find or identify sort of chance occurrences that might actually be opportunities, right? And how do you know when is the time to sort of take that leap? And so as you talk to different folks, you're going to find those different strategies and different approaches, and hearing how they've navigated that is going to give you more insight into your own process and what sort of feels right to you and what that looks like. I would also ask them, do they have advice for things that they wish they had done while they were at Puget Sound that they would encourage you to take advantage of right now while you're actually at the institution? There could be resources, there might be classes, there might be things that they really wish in hindsight I had gone back and done. I'll be honest, I wish if I had gone back to my alma mater, I wish I had actually taken some of those business courses that my parents wanted me to take. I wasn't interested at the time and I didn't want to take any of them. I think I took a macroeconomics course and that was probably it. But in hindsight, I think I actually would have taken more. And so think about what types of things you can really learn from that particular alum. Those would be some of the questions I would ask.
I think that's great. One of the things I found when I was interviewing for jobs upon graduation was that the employers were genuinely interested in hearing about my Puget Sound experience, and not only what I studied, but also the extracurriculars and how I applied what I had learned in class. And I think an alum can help also translate that a little bit better as well, as far as they intimately understand the Puget Sound experience and they've been in the workforce for X number of years. So how do we, again, bridge the college experience with the work experience, and that way it can also be helpful when you're doing informationals with alums.
Definitely.
So I don't want to be too focused on corporate type roles. So how does this advice translate maybe to the non-corporate environment if we think about nonprofit work or going on to doing other things in the world as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The advice still applies. I worked most of my career in higher education, and everything that I just told you would apply to getting a job in higher education. And the same goes for nonprofit as you're thinking about that line of work. Now, obviously, one of the things that might come out more in those conversations is perhaps the mission, right? What is the mission-oriented nature of why that organization stands to exist? What is it that they are trying to move, and what impact do they want? Now, I think one of the value adds, honestly, both, and I'll actually pick on my own industry in higher education, is I think we could use more talent and we could use more new entry-level employees that are thinking about the impact of education, for example, in terms of measurable metrics, right? Everybody that's been reading the news knows that higher education, for example, is at a real turning point when they think about their finances and they think about their viability and they think about their return on investment. And I think we can use a new sort of slate or cohort of folks that are coming in and really thinking about that problem and thinking about it from a data-oriented metrics example. And I know that for many of you, you're also thinking about data and analytics. That's certainly a growing trend across every industry. And you're learning a lot of that in your classes. So that's certainly a value add. For those of you that are really comfortable with both qualitative as well as quantitative metrics, that's something that you might be able to add value to a nonprofit or to a different type of sector that's not necessarily just corporate. So think about the mission and think about the impact of what they're looking for. But the networking, the research, all of that is exactly the same. All you're going to change is how you tailor your documents and your narrative and the language that you use to talk about your work. That's what's going to be adapted in all of this. But the actual process is still the same.
Great. So the next one's kind of an interesting question. What is the balance or approach to I want to work at X company versus I want to do this job or position?
Ooh.
Like, is one easier than the other, or how do you navigate that? And are there differences in navigating that?
Yeah, I actually love that question. I do think there are some differences in how you navigate that. I don't know that I would necessarily say one is better than the other. I think it really is a very, quite frankly, personal decision for you, okay? This is what I would say with that. If there's a particular company that you really want to work for, my immediate question to you would be why? Why do you want to work for that particular company? There are literally thousands and thousands of companies out there. Why are you so interested in this one or these 5 even? Is it something about their culture? Is it something about the training that you're able to get? Is it something about the people? Is it something about their mission, right? What is it about that company? You have to be able to really identify that, because what that's going to allow you to do is actually determine, based on your values, how high does that actually rank in what it is that you're interested in? And does that rank higher than doing a position or a function in that company that maybe you're not that interested in, right? So let's say you're really interested in Microsoft, but you really wanted to work in a finance role and they didn't have a finance role. And so now you've taken a marketing role, okay? That's a drastically different function. It's a different way of thinking all day long. It's a very different culture on the team. And so is working at Microsoft going to outweigh sort of your day-to-day experience, right? And only you can answer whether or not that is going to be worth it to you. Now, if you really want to go for a job or function, you could think about that as essentially a stepping stone to eventually get to the company that you're looking for. So maybe you take the job or function that you're interested in and you really start to build up your skill set in that area. And then you can, in a few years, move to the next position, and eventually work your way into the company that you want. Now, being in that particular functional area might allow you to be able to network with other colleagues that are also in that functional area, but might be at some of the companies of interest that you have, which could potentially down the road open that door for you. The other thing that I would actually do too is look at other people's profiles. So let's say, for example, you really want to go into finance at Microsoft. You might actually look up profiles, whether on LinkedIn or Handshake, of people who have done finance at Microsoft. And look at the other places that they've worked. Look at the other experiences that they've had before, and use that as a way to also open up opportunities to, I never considered this company. It's interesting to see a lot of the people that end up at Microsoft have also worked at, these 3 places. Maybe that's a good place for me to look and maybe initially start my search, right? So you can get creative with how you think about whether you're going to go straight for the company, but a role that maybe you don't really want, or whether you want to go for the function. Now, what I would say is this: it is harder to convince a hiring manager that they should hire you for a particular function or role that you might not actually be that interested in just because you want to be at the company. That is typically going to be a harder jump for you to do. So I'll leave you with that. But Ted, I'm actually interested in your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I always wanted to work in tech and specifically Microsoft. So I actually did let's approach the company first and then figure out the position second. And fortunately, that worked for me. And the reason why is Microsoft has a specific philosophy where we actually look at fit of the candidate specific to the company first.
Mhm.
And then secondly, what skill set or desire does that individual have for a specific position?
Mhm.
Um, and that, sometimes works. I've had candidates who said, yeah, that works. Like I love tech, or I love the company, and I'm willing to do a position that's not my first choice, because I understand that at the end of the day, it's a stepping stone perhaps into a great company, and my career can evolve from that point in time. And then I've had other individuals who were like, no, I don't want to do that work. Right. And the fit just wasn't there, because at the end of the day, it's a job, right? You're investing a lot of significant time and passion into it. So it should be a good fit at the end of the day as well. So
Yeah, definitely. It's so personal. It's so
it is.
personal.
It's a personal thing, right? I often compare it to, like a relationship or a marriage, right? Both sides need to fit together to a certain degree
That's right.
in that relationship. So
Exactly.
fantastic, Christine. So I think what we'll do is we'll do one more question here, and then if there's any final thoughts you want to just to leave us with, that would be certainly welcomed as well.
Mhm.
So as you know, Puget Sound is a liberal arts college.
Mhm.
So the question is do employers value my liberal arts education, or is my experience more important?
Yeah, 100% liberal arts matters. And we're seeing this across the board with employers. So I want to answer this actually from two different perspectives. One is as someone who was a liberal arts grad and has also worked as the associate provost at Wellesley College, which is also a liberal arts institution, I can assure you that there is nothing I feel more passionately and strongly about than the need for more liberal arts graduates to be in the world and to be in society. And I think when you look at what is happening across our country and in our society right now, we're at a precipice of a lot of different topics. And we need folks with the humanities and with liberal arts to help us think holistically about how we tackle the types of issues that our world is facing. And as we think about as a society and as a community, how we are going to improve and make that better across all sectors in all areas. These types of gnarly issues that we're dealing with, they are not siloed into a particular discipline. And we know that. And it takes liberal arts graduates to be able to piece together and see the connection where others might not be able to, and to be able to work well across these different disciplines, to be able to actually help make change happen and then to help sustain that behavior change as well. So I think liberal arts could not be more important for literally every single sector we are seeing. Now, I know the question is also, do employers value this, right? Like, so Christine values it, but do employers value it? And my answer would also be yes. We are seeing more and more employers across all sorts of different industries, whether that's finance, whether that's tech, whether that's education or nonprofit or healthcare, all looking at liberal arts graduates as well. Now, what I would say is your question is actually not a mutually exclusive one. They do value liberal arts, they also value skills. Okay. And so your ability to articulate what are both the soft skills, or I like to say core skills of communication and critical thinking and synthesizing and so on and so forth, those are important to be able to articulate. If you also have hard skills, okay, whether that's data analysis or digital fluency or a programming language or a foreign language, make sure that you are articulating that too. So it is important to actually couple both of it together. But we have certainly seen a lot of hiring across all the different sectors and industries for liberal arts grads, just as much as we have seen it for some of the pre-professional programs.
That's really reassuring to hear, because we often hear from students and certainly parents, what is the return on investment, if you will, for college these days? And it's even a little more targeted at liberal arts institutions that are not vocational educational institutions, right? Are very surgical on, you come to our school to become a business professional to get a job, right? That's not our mission for Puget
Yep.
Sound. But to your point, I have found that the education and a liberal arts education in particular directly translates to success and skills within the workforce. And I'm glad to hear that employers are recognizing that even more so, especially in the dynamic world that we live in today. So,
Absolutely. What I would also say to that too is I'm sure there are some administrators that might be on the line right now One of the biggest things that I feel is the gap between sort of that topic of ROI is simply the need to translate, right? So as an institution, it is our responsibility to figure out, how do we talk about the things that we know are happening in our classroom? How do we translate the great pedagogy that we know faculty are using to teach these different concepts? And how do we help not only the faculty, but the students, most importantly, to actually talk about that in language that makes sense to an employer? Employers across many industries don't speak the same language as academia, because academia in and of itself is its own industry and has its own lingo. And so the translation of those skills and the connection in seeing, wow, I had to do this group project. What did I get out of that? It's not just the content knowledge, it's also the ability to maybe work with some difficult people. It's the ability to have to problem solve. It's the ability to stick to a timeline, right? So on and so forth. And so that was a pedagogical choice by faculty to do that as a group project, or to choose that something is a group grade instead of an individual grade, right? And so those little choices that I think sometimes we don't give enough credit to for the faculty, we just need to teach students how to translate that, or teach the faculty how to make that explicit connection so that their students know and then can talk about it with employers in a really informed way. But I love that question.
Yeah, me too. And again, that's a great value for our alumni to play as well, because they have lived both sides of the coin, if you will, and the ability to use your word, translate the experiences is certainly something we look forward to. Well, thank you so much, Christine. We really appreciate you joining us this afternoon, and we certainly appreciate all the insights you shared with our Logger community as part of our Future Heights conference. And thank you everyone also for attending today. I did want to let the students know we do have members of the Career and Employment Services Office on the line here. They are continually monitoring the Q&A and the chat. So if you still have outstanding questions, please put them in the window here and we'll get back to you as well. And if not, I look forward to seeing you in some of our additional sessions over the next few days. So have a great rest of the week, and thanks again, Christine.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Take care.